Hi, and welcome to our Homeschool's Hidden Blessings seminar. We are going to be talking all about those things that maybe you weren't expecting that have turned out to be huge benefits to homeschooling and huge blessings for your family. I am Sunny, I'm Sonlight's community manager, and I'm also a Sonlight mom of 2 children who have been educated with Sonlight since preschool. I've got Amber and Lisa with me today, so let's go ahead and start with Amber. Amber, why don't you say hello and tell us what has been maybe the biggest surprise blessing for homeschool.
Hi, I'm Amber. I have 5 children. We have done Sonlight since the oldest was in pre-K. I think maybe one of the hidden blessings that I wasn't expecting was just how freeing it is to homeschool and not be beholden to anyone's schedule, anyone else's schedule. I don't have to ask permission when I take my child to the doctor or to the orthodontist. I don't have to get slips allowing them in and out of class. When we've had emergencies in our family or even plans for vacation, we get to go when we want and we can work around that. So that has been really a joy.
Yeah, huge benefit. Lisa, what about you? What's been the biggest surprise for you?
So I'm Lisa. I have 3 children, 2, which I homeschooled from kindergarten through their high school graduation. And I think the biggest surprise to me, not why I started homeschooling, was just our family relationships, and not just relationships between me and my girls, but their relationship and even their relationship with their dad. A lot of the time that we were homeschooling, he worked close enough so he came home for lunch. And that was always a great point in our day. We generally tended to have our big meal at that time. And we sat around the table and it was much more relaxed because you know how dinner time goes when you have all the people, you're cramming down whatever and running out the door. And so we still had that, but dinner was not we hadn't missed out. We still had a family lunch together. And that was a huge blessing to us because their dad was connected and we got to enjoy one another.
Yeah, absolutely. But you both said that flexibility of schedule and that time spent together, I think, is a huge benefit because you do spend all those hours together that normally everyone would be separate. Or like Lisa, you mentioned your 2 girls have a stronger relationship because they're spending time together, unless you have twins. And even if you do, they're probably not in school together. So yeah, you are absolutely correct about that. Let's talk about that benefit, that time together and how it's very, I don't know, organic or more natural when you're homeschooling than when you are limited to somebody else's schedule.
Yeah, I think I've loved having my 5 children, the beauty and opportunity of knowing each other since they were babies, right? When you bring, so my oldest was 4 when my son was born. So I had a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, a baby. And what that 4-year-old and 2-year-old got to experience by having a baby in the house. And then when those 3, we added a 4th, right? And just they were part of it. They were part of each other's lives. Even when my oldest was 12 is when I had my 5th. And what those kids learned by dealing with a baby was just so wonderful. I remember my brother was born when I was 6, but I was away at school all day, every day. I didn't enjoy him and I didn't really care anything about him. And so I think just watching them interact with each other, the make-believe, the stories, even the reading aloud in the evenings when the littlest ones went to bed and I would read aloud and the older 3 would be sitting around playing, doing puzzles, doing something. So that time together is just priceless. Of course, they get older and start running around for youth group and sports and stuff. So I really look back with a lot of fondness at that time when we were just together.
Yeah, for us, my mother-in-law passed the year before we started homeschooling, and I started caring for my father-in-law. And through the years, my father-in-law passed and my stepfather needed care. And then my mother needed care. And then I had to care for my stepfather again. So we were always taking care of someone. And I don't know how I could have done that and managed the school schedule, you know, being at school at a certain time, picking up at a certain time, not having that kind of flexibility. So that was a definite relational builder for us. For my kids, they served together. and for our relationship, my relationship with the girls, because I was tired and I was frustrated and I was at the end of my rope, and they saw all of it. They saw the good and they saw the ugly, but they also saw a mom who knew that she needed the Lord to get through those things. And they really saw my faith, I think. So I really appreciated that. And had they been away from me at school, maybe it would have been easier to juggle doctor's appointments. I don't know, but they would have missed out on so much that I think has made them into empathetic and compassionate people. So I'm really grateful for that.
You know, one thing that Lisa said, and I just love it. I think when you homeschool, you really are living out discipleship, right? Because disciple making is when someone is living life with you, eating with you, sharing time with you. And that in our culture, in our society, that doesn't really go on a lot. And so in the homeschooling world, we have an opportunity, because Lisa said the highs and the lows, that's true for us all, right? So the times we lose our temper and need to ask for forgiveness, the times when we're hungry and just cranky, the times when we're sad, legitimately sad and mourning, our kids are walking through it with us, watching us respond, watching us lean on the Lord for strength, for wisdom, for whatever. There's not a part of our lives that they're not seeing. And it's just an incredible thing. And of course, we're not going to do it right, right every time, but they need to see that too, because they know my parents aren't perfect, but here's what we do when we mess up and when we need help. So it's that discipleship relationship really is incredible.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think what you guys were saying there, they see you at your good and bad. They get to really know you as people, not just your role as their parent, which is something that I love, because I felt like I knew two versions of my parents. I knew who they were when I was a kid, and then I discovered who they really were when I grew up. But my kids are already seeing that side of me, like, oh, my mom's a real person. She has things that go bad. You know, I don't really remember my parents. They never brought up difficulties or things like that in front of us when we were growing up. But my kids see it all. I also love what you guys said about a baby sibling or a grandparent. You know, these are the relationships that you may not get a lot of time with if you're off at school all day. And I mean, I absolutely love that your kids were able to experience that. And I know my daughter is 5 years older than her brother too. So I always worried that they would not be super close, but same thing like what you said, Amber, he was always around and she was always trying to take care of him and all the little things that, you know, a big sister wants to do, but it's because she was there with him. So yeah, absolutely. I don't think anybody ever regrets more time spent with the people they love. So, you know, it's absolutely, there's some days where you might be tired and think you need a break. But I think looking back, especially, I think all of us would agree that that time spent with those people in our life you can't even count how priceless that is. Let's talk about the chance, and I know we've touched on this in other sessions, but the chance for children to learn and develop at their own pace, as opposed to being pressured to meet, you know, a classroom standard or what everybody else seems to be doing. I mean, that's one of homeschool's beauties, is that you really get to develop at the rate you need to and into who you are. Why don't you guys share a little bit more about that?
You want to go first, Lisa?
Sure. Well, I think a lot of times in homeschooling, we think about that as the kid who maybe struggles to keep up, but there's also the blessing of the one who doesn't need to be held back, because not everyone is ready to move on. So I had my son who went to public school. He would finish his work early and his reward was another worksheet. Like, that's not a reward, and that's not what he wanted. And the times that he got in trouble was generally, he was, you know, one of the smarter kids in the class, all his work done. He gravitated toward the other end. That kid wasn't doing their work, and then they got in trouble. So I think homeschooling helps both ends. You can allow your child to move at a pace that they would like with those skill-based subjects. If your child finishes their math book in January, just get the next one. It's okay. but still allowing them to keep on those non-skill-based subjects, history, the things that require maturity at their age. They can learn more if they need to. You can go deeper, but I think we have both of those groups of kids very well served through homeschooling at your own pace. If you need extra time, we've got that. If you've got it and we can plow ahead, we've got that too. And that is such a gift to not have to fit into anyone's box.
Yeah. And I love too, that idea of when you're homeschooling, if you are studying something that really trips your trigger, you can go down the rabbit trail. You have time for that. And because in school, there's so much wasted time, right? To everyone finishing the worksheet, everyone getting in line, everyone walking to the lunchroom. Okay, so all of those areas where there's wasted time, we can fill it with, oh, that's so cool. Let's watch a YouTube about that, And typically, I know even my older kids, we would all kind of join in the fun of that discovery. So that's really, really great. And I love that you can, just like Lisa said, the goal is learning, right? So if you're done with math, let's keep pushing on, right? There's no point in stopping. And if it's super easy for you, let's pump to the next level because we don't have to. And then same with the others. If I need to take more time on this lesson, I can do that. And reading, I love even reading aloud, right? In a schoolroom setting, you only get to read aloud a little piece and then it's the next person's turn. I love that I can sit for 15 solid minutes and let my child read, right? And I can help out if I need to, whatever, but there's that concentrated time and I don't have to push harder. I know I'm going to pick it up right there tomorrow and they're going to get another chance the next day. So yeah, it's really, really sweet.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that you really know where your kids are in each subject too, because I have one that is quieter. And I think in a classroom, he would just kind of sit there and try not to be noticed. He would not ask for questions or ask questions if he needed help and things like that. And I know when he was kindergarten, first grade level and struggling to learn how to read, I mean, every day I was like, oh, thank God he is with us. And we are seeing what his reading level is doing, because I think in a classroom, he would have just sat there and not really said a whole lot. And, who knows if he would have been, passed up to the next level or whatever, because there's a lot of that happens in school, but he needed that additional help and we were able to give it to him. Another thing, you guys were talking about how the goal is to learn. And I think about when I was in school, my goal was to make good grades. I didn't care if I learned anything because of the way school is really taught. I mean, it was, okay, what do I need to do to make an A on this? What do I need to do to win an award? Like I'm very motivation, like for me, if I can win something, I'm all about it. And so that was kind of the way I looked at school. And so it's been so fun to see my kids enjoy learning, but then also for me to get to learn along with them and we get to discover things together. Amber, you talked about the rabbit trails a little bit where you can go watch a YouTube video on something. Yeah, and I absolutely agree. It gives you so much more flexibility to learn for learning's sake and have fun together and make those memories together that you would not otherwise.
Yeah. And Sunny, the one thing you said about your son, and I was thinking this is also kind of a blessing. If he struggles with reading at home, he doesn't get a label. He doesn't even necessarily know, oh, I'm struggling with reading. Look, everybody else in my class is so much better than me. I must be dumb. That doesn't happen, right? It doesn't need to happen in homeschooling. You say, okay, this is where we are right now. And we just keep working because typically, I mean, unless there are huge challenges, the reading all kind of comes out in the wash by 3rd to 5th grade. And how many kids get labeled, right? And even with math, sometimes it clicks at a certain point, but already they've been labeled. And so there's this stigma, and then they start to have this very negative talk that doesn't need to be there. So I love that too with homeschooling, another hidden blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about conflict resolution, communication, and stronger relationships. This is something that, we all kind of have to develop those skills, whether we go to school or not. I think in a lot of ways, homeschooling makes that easier. But what do you guys think? Anything about conflict, communication, or building those stronger relationships? Any of that? we can talk about.
Well, I loved taking my kids out in times that it wasn't as busy, not on the weekend where everybody's running around with their hair on fire because that's the only day they have, and having them learn to communicate with people around them. Okay, you need to buy a toy for your friend for their birthday. Well, here's $20. You can make your selection, you can make your checkout, that kind of thing. So they learn to communicate. They definitely had to communicate with one another, and conflict resolution, I should have given them credit on their transcripts because, you're always together. We see our family at their worst and at their best. And I think a lot of times when you have, 5 to 9 or whatever, that time that you get home from school and you have to do homework and you have to do the other, everybody's biting one another's head off, and you don't have time to resolve the conflict because there's too much to do. So you just say, don't talk to your brother so meanly, and you move on, and I don't think that as homeschoolers, we have to do that because there's not so much pressure. We can say, hey, let's talk about why that's not the way to go. And I'm not saying I did that every single time. Sometimes I just said, hey, don't hit your sister because I said so. But I think for the majority of the time, we were able to address the issue. And then we didn't have that kind of thing come up as much.
Yeah, I think what Lisa's saying is so true. There could be a whole course offering of conflict resolution, right? And so in school, especially in elementary and high school, there aren't conflict resolution courses typically. A lot of kids go to college for their first taste of conflict resolution. And I think, oh, that's hilarious. My kids have been conflict resolution training since they were like 3, as soon as they could talk and sin against each other. And so just that very basic, right? Okay, Emily, I'm sorry that I shoved you off the piano bench. Will you please forgive me? Right? Yes, I forgive you. Okay, kiss, that's great. Move on. Well, move on with your day. But those very little things of learning to ask for forgiveness and learning to extend forgiveness, the difference between I'm sorry and will you forgive me, right? Because in our homes, accidents happen. So and I'm sorry is good for an accident, and I'm sorry is not enough for a purposeful slight or punch or whatever it might be. So the difference between accidents and purposeful meanness and all of that, I think, just a quick story. When my oldest daughter went to college, her 3rd year, she was applying to be an RA. So they asked her, okay, so say you publicly reprimand someone for something and you find out later that you got it wrong. What would you do? And she said, oh, well, first of all, if there were other people around, I would ask them to come and I would apologize in front of them. And I would ask the person for forgiveness. And anyway, she went through the whole spiel, pretty much what we do in our home. And they said to her, where did you learn that? And she said, that's what we do at home all the time. So it was like, whoa, that's what we teach in our course on, conflict resolution. How would you ever know that? Well, that's what you do at home. You grow up with it. And this is an opportunity, right? We have some children who would behave so perfectly all day at school. Mm-hmm. I think the 3 of us are all kind of firstborn people pleaser types. So we did not get in trouble in school. And we have children who would never get in trouble. And then we have children who would be in trouble all day long, and neither are right. Mm-hmm. So at home, the kids who would normally be good always aren't good at home, and they get a chance to be refined, just like the littler ones get shown mercy some because, so it's really good.
Well, and what you said there, Amber, made me think about if you're at school all day or you're at work all day, that's your best hours. And then you come home tired, ready to let your hair down. And that's when crankiness and fights oftentimes break out, as kind of that end of the day witching hour, if you will. And I love what you were saying there, though, because it makes me think of when your kids are together all day, when they're with you all day, they get to see the ups and downs. So they have some really sweet moments that happen, but then also it's not like they're only together when they're tired and cranky and have those things going on.
Yes.
And I know my kids have already learned a lot about how they work best just by being in the same room together. So my daughter likes to be in a quiet space by herself, no other noises going on. My son, the whole circus could go through the room and he'd still be able to focus on whatever he's doing, which also means I have to make sure he's really tuned in when I'm reading to him, because he might be thinking about other things. But it is really interesting and fascinating to see, like, okay, they've learned that because they've been in a space where they can really explore that. It's not that typical classroom setting of, okay, now it's time to be quiet. Now it's time to go to recess. Now it's time to do this. And what you said earlier about the labels, I mean, absolutely. I think my whole view of school as a child was based on the labels that I developed early in my educational experience. And same thing with my siblings and other friends I've spoken to, their whole view of education was shaped by those labels. Are you the good kid? Are you the bad kid? Are you the smart kid? Or, you know, all of those things. And so, yeah, I agree with you guys that having the chance to spend together, to apologize, to forgive, you know, you're always going to be in each other's space. So learning how to deal with situations that are stressful to you. I mean, what a great way to pave yourself or prepare yourself for adult life, where you can't just freak out and smack someone when they're bothered.
Definitely fun in the workplace.
Yeah,
that's right.
Exactly.
And, you know, and even in a classroom, right, you have generally 14 to 25 students. A teacher can't do that. A teacher can't stop everything and take kids and help them learn to, it's just not possible to invest that way. Not really. Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the opportunity to pursue unique interests. We've talked a little bit about that, whether that be academic or otherwise. You know, how does homeschooling and that freedom and that flexibility to manage your own schedule really open up kids to a unique opportunity that they wouldn't have otherwise?
Well, my girls are very big soccer players. In fact, Rebecca is still playing in college. So that I don't know how kids that attend a traditional school keep the schedule that my kids kept when they were playing very competitively. We generally met with a trainer 1 or 2 mornings a week, and then they did play at a local Christian school, so they practiced there from 3 to 5. I picked them up with, you know, some kind of high protein snack and a dry jersey and drove them to a different soccer field, and they practiced for 2 more hours with their club team. And then we got in the car on Friday night and drove somewhere so they could play in a tournament over the weekend. When do you fit homework into that craziness, you know? And we tended to adjust our workload based on when they were in that double season. They were always playing club, but when school ball happened, we did the hard stuff in the beginning of the year, because in Florida, soccer is a winter sport because winter, you know, what else. So we loaded up on the time that it wasn't fall ball, so that they were able to do that. But I really do not know how people manage any kind of outside activity when you're trying to keep a traditional school schedule and keep on their, you know, homework and all the things.
Yeah, because even with school, the practices are worked in, so maybe that's a little less running for right after. But then most kids who are exceptional at a sport do travel ball, do the whole summer thing. It's just a lot, and it's a lot of pressure. So my kids haven't been super athletic or super driven in athletics. They'll play their community sport or whatever. But I do have a couple that have done a lot of theater in high school. And then I have one, my youngest right now is doing some productions. And so tech week, they're out till 11 o'clock at night. Well, that isn't a big deal for me. She can sleep in, and it's a month, right? It's a month of a pretty heavy schedule. So I can cut back on school. I can double up on history on the days she's not performing. I can make sure we do math, but I can maybe set science aside for a couple of weeks. Like, I can make those adjustments. I also have a son who's a very gifted pianist. And so, you know, he'll do calculus and physics in the morning. And whenever he feels like taking a break, he'll be in his room and he'll play the piano for 2 or 3 hours. And then he'll come back up to read his literature or whatever. And I think I just love that. I just love that he can break and do this thing that he really loves. He can have an hour-long lesson with a professor in the middle of the day. It's not a big deal. He doesn't have to check out of school or do something special. So there's just all of these unique too opportunities, I think, for homeschooling, where you get to give them tools in their tool belt. Even my daughter has horse riding lessons, and we were able to do that on a Friday morning. She has openings, right? When the other kids who are in school can't come till the afternoon. So we can go in the morning because I can get my school done later. It's not a big deal. So there are definitely some really sweet blessings when it comes to that.
Yeah, and something you guys said reminded me, like my daughter went and spent the night at another homeschooled friend's house last night, even though it's a weekday, because they both have the option to do their school whenever they want. So even though that's not an activity, it gives her the opportunity to go hang out with her friends when she wants to. And I love what you guys said about sleeping in. If you watched me in most of our videos, I'm a huge proponent of letting your kids sleep until they naturally would wake up. I think it's just better for them. It also teaches them to manage their time. Because when you're an adult, you know, mommy's not there waking you up to go to your job or whatever you have going on. And so I do let my kids, if they want to stay up late, they have to go upstairs at bedtime, but they can sit in their room and read. They can do their schoolwork. That's often when my teenager does her schoolwork, is once she goes to her room for bed, and then she'll stay up for a few hours and do her reading and that type of stuff, because that's when she feels the sharpest. And then she has all day to do what she wants to do until I'm ready to do school with her. So I love that flexibility to do those things.
Sunny, I was thinking too, if your teenage daughter wants to babysit for someone for 2 hours on a Tuesday morning and make some money, she can do that and still get her school done. Exactly. It's not a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. And she does that we have a neighbor who has littles, like toddler age baby, not in school yet themselves. And yeah, she was like, oh, I'm looking for a sitter that's available during the day and I can never find anyone. And I was like, I've got one of those.
Yeah, exactly.
and so it's been good. Yeah. Because my daughter has since had to learn, okay, well, if I'm babysitting tomorrow at 9, I need to shift my schoolwork to do this or whatever. And yeah, we've often done after school activities just because that's when I'm free to drive kids around, but they get to relax during the day when they're done with their schoolwork, and then they can still do those activities that, Lisa, what you said, when do kids do homework if they're at school all day and then add their activities all night? When does that happen? So
and when do you get to spend time together? Yes.
Yeah. And when do you get to eat a meal together? I mean, that's a great point too. If you've got kids and activities at night, it's going to be really hard to get those family meals in. And I think everybody knows that's important. You know, let's all get around the table together. But if you can't do that on a weeknight, you know, how else can you fit that in? Yep. And homeschooling allows that in such a nice way, I think. So let's talk about, maybe we talked about the biggest surprise early on. Is there anything else though that we have not touched on that was also something maybe surprising to you, or maybe you had heard that it was an advantage to homeschooling, but you've really seen it play out well in your families?
Well, I'll say, whatever time we did the helps and hacks that we talked to our graduates, and I was at my older daughter's and I asked her to do that. And her thing that she said was that I taught her to manage her time well. I didn't realize I was teaching her. I mean, that was not something I was working on, teaching her to manage her time. But she said, because I had homeschooled and because my mom didn't, you know, micromanage me in high school, I really learned to balance my time. And she uses those skills now as a wife and a mom. And she said, you know, even when she went to school, people were always struggling to get their assignments in. And she said, even now, some of her mom friends are like, how did you get your laundry done? And she's like, well, laundry gets done on Tuesday or whatever, you know, because she learned to manage herself and to set a routine. We did not ever have a schedule like, you know, has to be done by 4, but a routine. First you do this, then you do this, or on Mondays we wash clothes or whatever. And I think that, I mean, I was really surprised after we cut the video. I was like, really? That's what you came away with? And she said, I really appreciate that I learned to manage myself. And I was like, oh, okay.
That's so fun. I was thinking, Lisa, my oldest daughter said something very similar. And it's so interesting, I think, because, and this is just a little plug for Sonlight, with the IGs, right? Having it mapped out like that. So from a very early age, she kind of saw, okay, this is how things are organized. And then when she went to college, she just automatically was like, okay, I've got a planner and I do this, and here's the syllabus and here's how I plug it in. And just like Lisa said, noticing, oh, none of my friends know what to do, just get it done. So that's a really big one. I think something that I wasn't maybe expecting, but I have just loved so much is how much I've learned and how many books that I've gotten to read that I never knew existed. And I don't know, when I first started on this journey, I was attracted to Sonlight because of the literature richness of it. And I thought if I could create a homeschool model, I would want it to look like this. So that's why I loved it. And then through the years, just being able to sit and read, like in my wildest imaginations, I thought, wouldn't it be so fun to have kids just sitting around and we read at night? And that is what happened. And I remember once I think my oldest was in 8th grade, and I was sitting there reading about 7 o'clock at night. We weren't running around because they were still young enough that that wasn't happening quite yet. And just sitting there reading, and there they were. And I thought, God, thank you so much. What a privilege and what a blessing. You know, we're not all in our own rooms watching TV. My kids are sitting here listening to me. I don't know, it might've been Oliver Twist. It was not even, or Great Expectations or something. It was amazing. And I am so thankful for the hour upon hour of reading I've done with my kids. And when they're home, they still sit and listen to me read whatever I'm reading to my youngers. They're listening, or, oh, remember this book? It's amazing. And I'm so, so grateful.
Yeah, I agree. We have amazing book discussions all the time. Yeah, as a family, oh, I loved this one, or remember this character. And what I think is so funny is just different life situations that bring back memories of, oh, remember in this book, this happened, or this person did this, or whether it's a true historical figure or a fictional character, the kids really latch onto that and they remember and retain so much information. It so just
much for so long.
Yeah. Well, and what you said, the things you learn, I like every day, I'm like, did you know this? like I'm asking my husband, I'm like texting a friend, did you know this? I just learned something new. I never knew this.
So angry. I'm like, why would they not have taught me that in school?
I think, Sunny, what's really embarrassing is I've been through most of these books 4 times. It's my 4th time through, and I'm still going, wait, I must have known that because I've read this before, but it didn't stick in me. But my kids are like, oh yeah. Anyway, it's amazing. So you get to keep learning over and over and over.
Yeah, keep learning. And I mean, Sonlight always adds new books. So then it's, let's try this new book and see what's in there. Yeah. So I love that piece of it, like you said. Yeah. And then you guys both mentioned the instructor's guides for different reasons. For me, that was part of what attracted me to Sonlight, because I knew I wanted to try homeschooling, but I had no desire to create my own curriculum. I know some people love to do that and they want to piece things together. I just wanted to make sure that I was not going to ruin my kids. I was like, what do I need to do that isn't going to ruin their chances of, developing the skills they need? And I saw Sonlight and saw that it was fully planned out and it gave me that structure, but again, very loosely. And I know I've talked about this in other sessions as well, is that the longer I do it, the more flexible I become, because I know they're catching a lot of those things. Lisa, you mentioned your daughter saying something that you didn't even realize you were teaching her, and after you have a few years, you're like, oh yeah, they are learning things that I'm not even intentionally trying to teach them. So yeah, absolutely agree with that. So do you guys have anything else that you would like to add before we go? I think we could sing Sonlight's praises all day, but.
Yeah, I think just, I love what you said, Sunny, about the longer you go, the more flexible you can become. And I think that is a blessing. Type A, can I turn it in early and get extra credit? That was me in school. But taking the opportunity to relive all of that through my kids' eyes and to learn things with them, and to be flexible, to be like, oh, this isn't the lesson we were supposed to learn today. We're going to set this aside and learn some conflict resolution or service of others, or how to watch bugs go around in the mud puddles, whatever it is. But I love that you said that the longer you go, the more flexible you are. And I think when I'm in the booth talking to people and they're like, well, what about? And I say, well, the longer you do it, the less you care, because a box is just a box, but these are people, and that's what we're dealing with. And I think that's the beauty of what we're doing, is we are nurturing little people. We're not here to check the boxes, not here to whatever. We are here to love our children the best way that we can. And such a blessing to be able to hang out with them and get to know them. I say all the time, I don't know about your kids, but my kids are pretty daggone neat, I like them. They are cool people.
Well, that's another blessing is, you like your kids, right? Like, you don't just love them because you have to, because they're your children. You have grown children and you like spending time with them. And not that you can't have that if you're not homeschooling, but I think homeschooling, you just develop that bond over the years of time spent together where, you're like, oh, you're a cool person. I want to hang out with you in your adult version.
Yeah. And I think if you're brand new to homeschooling, a lot of the things we're talking about can seem very scary, right? Like when we talk about sometimes you just have to be flexible and let go. I know when early on, I was just so afraid that I was going to forget something or miss something, or there's going to be this huge gap. So I hope that anybody listening will trust us a little bit when we say, if you love your children and you care about them learning, you're not going to have gaps. It's going to be okay. And there's trusting the process, right? And knowing it takes time, and they're growing and they're developing. And I'll tell you what, I like Lisa, I cannot imagine. I have no regrets when it comes to the amount of time I spent with my children. I'm about ready to graduate my 4th. And I know that's kind of marks the end of having that child in my home full time under my surveillance. And it went really fast. And there were times when I thought I was speaking to a brick wall trying to read to that kid. And now I've watched him, God use the talents he's given him. And I think as a little person, going to school would have crushed that out of him. He needed that time to be creative and be alone and explore and build Legos and all of that stuff. It's always part of learning for him. And now things are coming together. I don't regret 1 minute of that. And I think if I didn't have that time, I think I would look back and say, wow, that went really fast. But as it is, I wish I'd read one more book to them, because I know I did. I read so many books and we spent so much time together. What an incredible gift it's been.
Yeah, that was amazing. There's the conclusion right there. I don't think I can add anything to that. And I think you've heard it from all of us at various points that we don't regret the decision. There are hard days, absolutely. But yes, once you get through them, you realize how amazing it's been. And I don't think most of us would change really anything because of the way it's worked out. So yeah, and most of us too are reformed box checker type A perfectionist personalities. So if you are watching and you're like, nope, I've got to do everything, we assure you, you do not. And if you're more laid back and you're overwhelmed looking at everything, you do not have to do everything. Work with the kids God gave you and raise those kids. So yeah, I think this is just, I feel like I could keep going, and you guys have said so many amazing things. And I hope that for those of you watching, that you are hearing what we're saying, as fully as we mean that. But yeah, you will not regret the time that you spend with those kids, snuggled together, reading good books. So If you have any concerns or questions, though, we are here for you. I always want to remind anyone watching, whether you're new to Sonlight or you've been around a long time, we pray for you, we encourage you, we offer advice and suggestions all in our Sonlight Connections app. So please come over there and join us. If you need anything at all, let us know. Also, if you need help picking out a program or anything like that, go to Sonlight's website, sonlight.com/contact, and we can help you out with those types of decisions as well if you're trying to figure out what to even do or where to begin. So make sure to go over there. Let us know if you need anything, because we would love to help you out. Thank you, Amber, Lisa, for being here. You've shared so many great things today.